All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Club at the End of This World. I'm your host, Jamin Shively, here with my queen, Melianor, and we're starting with personal updates. So take it away, Queen Melianor, followed by my sister, Hurricane Victoria, followed by Miles, followed by Adam, followed by me. So take it away, sweetie. Personal updates.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to give you my first personal update. These are my little seedlings that are growing. So I'm actually taking action on what I've been suggesting to everybody, and I'm planting a garden. So this new life is really exciting to watch coming up. I'm learning a lot by watching. I also applied to PAWS, which is an animal rescue shelter here in the Northwest, to become a volunteer there to work with wounded wildlife. And my application was accepted, and I now get to do their training program. So I'm super excited about that. The animal that, it was actually a bird that inspired me to apply to that program is an albatross that rode on a cargo ship from Honolulu to the Duwamish River here in the Northwest, and it was almost starved to death. And they are working on bringing him back to life. He can actually stand up now, and he's gaining weight. So I really want to go work with this guy. And it's just, it helps. I'm finding it's really grounding and really helps to take these actual action steps, not just the artful activism or talking, but actually doing things. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. And Victoria, on to you now.
Thank you. I must agree, Melissa. I have been in between floods planting flowers where I can in pots. And it is amazing what just getting out there and just a little digging in the ground will do. And of course, I feed my birds, and I'm trying to get involved in some voluntary as you and I have spoken about as far as education. Just wanted to give everyone an update. I'm sure you've seen Tulsa. We've had all the national news people here. The rivers are going down. It's been really, it's a catastrophe. A lot of people, you know, there's homes that have been built 50 years and they have never, ever been flooded, and they're gone now. So it's interesting to be here. I don't know if anyone has watched. Bob Beckwith has done a video of what's actually happening in the Midwest as far as the currents changing and being wavy and things like that. So as my brother Jamin likes to point out, it's just a hoax, but man, we are witnessing it in real time. So we're hanging in there, and people have been amazing, helping each other out, kindness. I've seen patience. It's kind of, it reminds me of what was at the opening line? It was the best of times and worst of times. It's been that here, and just a lot of people losing a lot of possessions. Luckily, there's been not loss of life. I always worry about the animals. Melissa and I know we do, but there's been a lot of volunteers in that way too. So anyway, we're rolling along in Oklahoma.
Awesome. Great to hear. Very good. All righty. Next up is Miles. Take it away, Miles.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending where you are. So, yeah, my name is Miles Flagg, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Treaty 7 territory here in southern Alberta. I've had a busy week, a number of things that I've been doing. Well, first of all, I did tweet this out, today's social club meeting, to people on Twitter and also LinkedIn, because I probably have more LinkedIn followers than I do on Twitter. And the thing about that is my perspective is that I'm not interested in getting employment in business as usual. So consequently, I've been very free to post things like Social Club, Dr. McPherson, and Stuart Scott on my LinkedIn feed. So hopefully that might attract some viewers today. Another update I had the opportunity to partake in some bacon this morning, but I refused. So, and it wasn't that difficult at all. In fact, as time goes on, I'm really finding I'm not inclined to eat meat. And I'm not going to say I'm 100% vegan. That would be a fallacy, but I definitely believe in it. And essentially, dairy, butter, milk, ice cream, none of that anymore. So anyway, very important to get onto this vegan plant-based diet. Another thing that I did was, and I'm still working on it now, I was able to connect a former Minister of Defense for Canada, the Honorable Paul T. Hellyer, with Skip Conover, who is the founder of the Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group. And Skip interviewed the Honorable Paul Hellyer, and they talked about some really interesting things, such as, believe it or not, unexplained aerial phenomena, formerly known as UFOs. And the coincidence is that, and Skip made note of this. He said, "Oh, this is really interesting," because he posted this interview, which primarily was focused on banking and the monetary system and things such as Paul Hellyer's book here, The Money Mafia. But nevertheless, there was some discussion about UAPs, unexplained aerial phenomena, because as former Minister of Defense in Canada, Mr. Hellyer remembers getting these reports coming across his desk. Now, we're going back to the 60s. Now, he didn't think much of it. Okay, there's people see things. But in 2004, he really started to take seriously some of the things that people were sending him. And anyway, cut to the chase. The very next day that Skip Conover posted that video interview, and it's available on his channel, there was mainstream coverage of a lot of these reported sightings by United States Navy flyers or airmen and airwomen. So that's one thing I'm doing. And I'm actually typing up the transcript of that conversation. I also just handed in an assignment that I did for my introductory course or studies into Indigenous peoples here in Canada. And the title of the project is How Have I Been Colonized? And the curious thing about that is just yesterday, I believe, there's a major report released by a commission in Canada that's been investigating, I think maybe now for 4 years, called the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Report. And there's quite a synchronicity there. Finally, another thing that I did was Friday, we were suffering terrible smoke, like really dreadful smoke. It's as if you had a campfire and you were under a tarp with a campfire. The smoke was that bad. So I thought, okay, I'm going to head down for Friday's Strike for Future student strike in front of City Hall. And I joined some people, some young people there, some students and some adults. And I posted that on my Twitter feed if anyone's so inclined. And I also made a link to the hashtag Bon Jovi, because Bon Jovi was playing in Moscow. And what I wanted to do was I created a message for Moscow. So a bit of a long story, but anybody interested in reading my message for Moscow, it's on my Twitter handle. So that's my update. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Great stuff, Miles. Thank you so much. Welcome, Fred, who just joined. We're doing personal updates now. Next up for personal updates is Adam, followed by Fred, if you'd like, followed by Jamin. Take it away, Adam.
Okay. Well, I don't see my, okay. I've been working on my website pretty hard. So I've been working with, people you know too, Jamin, and trying to develop this vision for a world without money. And it's a lot of fun, but it's really a lot of work. And I've just been cranking at it. So, and I'm trying to get it done and out there as fast as I can, but everything takes time. So it just takes longer than I thought. And but it's when it comes out, it'll be coherent and understandable, So, and it's helping me to formulate and better understand exactly what I'm saying. And so I think it's all really important. And that's what I've been working on. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Fred, brother,
Yes.
you'll pick. Fair enough. All righty. Well, I'll give my update. So, one important update is that Fred and Melissa and I all went to an Extinction Rebellion meeting on Sunday in Seattle. And that was really cool, really exciting to finally be kind of face-to-face in a serious meeting. I had met with Extinction Rebellion groups in San Francisco previously, going back to January. But this was the first time we actually had a serious meeting. And it was really good stuff. Fred, you might want to mute your microphone when you're not talking, or I can mute you. If
I
you
thought it was.
Okay. You see the icon there. Okay. Anyway, so that was exciting. Also, last week's social club really rocked my world and, got me onto this whole creative thinking track around, what is it we need to set out to do? And what's the basis for it? And why is this the path that we should follow and all that? And so I've done a lot of thinking and writing on that. And I sent out to the email list kind of a synopsis of my writing, which I'd like to read when we get into that main topic. But this is fundamentally centered around a community center, which in turn is centered around a community cafe, a vegan community cafe with zero single-use anything. Not just no single-use plastic, no single-use paper, no single-use metal, no single-use anything. So everything reused, all the packaging, reusable, for whether it's taking food home from the grocery store, from the restaurant, or even the stuff that we receive from suppliers at the restaurant or at the grocery store. Nothing single use, nothing thrown away. And that's a radical new step, just as veganism is a radical new step. Just as ending hunger is a radical new step, just as transforming the whole basis for the economy through to a compassionate economy, which supports and is supported by this whole center, is a radical step. So it's kind of like this radical bundle that we're working on putting together. And, anyway, so I'm really excited about all that. I've just been really kind of focusing on that because for me, it answers the question, what do we need to focus on right now? For me, anyway. For me, an answer is becoming really, really clear. And it's deeply connected to collective intelligence, as we'll get into. But beyond collective intelligence, it is a very clear pathway for what we can do first that will have maximum impact for saving life on Earth. So anyway, I'll read that whole thing and screen share it when the time comes. But now that everyone's given a personal update who wants to, let's talk agenda. So there's that whole agenda item around community center, vegan, compassionate economy, etc. Is there anything else anyone would like to add to the agenda in addition to that? And just speak up if you do. Well, I mean, that's a big topic.
Yeah. No, I have a question. I just got a message that popped up on my screen.
Okay.
Where's that being generated?
That there's this troublemaker on the called Adam, and Adam typed it in. I'm just kidding about the troublemaker. Speaking of troublemakers, welcome Dan. Oh my goodness, Dan's in his car and presumably in Chicago.
Yeah.
Of a snowstorm. Dan, speak up, Dan, and welcome. If you want to give an update, now's a good time.
Yeah.
Seriously, is that a no?
No, you
But
can't
he's
hear
wearing
me?
a hat.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
I got the
Anyway,
hat.
go ahead. I'll mute myself.
Thank you, Fred.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right, let me.
Okay, Dan, the two jokers have stopped goofing off. If you want to talk now, you kind of got mute there towards the end. So anyway, Dan's in a car.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, now you're muted, Dan. You were unmuted before. Now you're muted. I'm going to change this to the name of this program to the Jacques Clouseau, Inspector Clouseau Social Club, because we've been having a lot of Clouseau moments today. Dan, you're still muted. Anyway, love to hear from you.
Okay. Am I good now?
You're good now. Go.
Okay. Yeah. It's a little bit unfamiliar using the iPhone. But yeah, it's been raining. It looks like it's about to stop.
I can't hear him.
Okay, Fred, that's your issue, I think, because we can all hear him. Miles, can you hear Dan? Thumbs up if you can. Okay, yeah, that's your issue, Fred. You may want to either restart or leave and rejoin or something like that. But carry on, Dan.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of rain here in the Midwest, as I'm sure Victoria down in Oklahoma is much more impacted than here in Chicago. It's been a lot of ways but mild, but nonetheless, it's been generally cool and wet, and seems pretty clear. 2019 is going to be the year where consciousness is fully raised on the planetary implosion. So that's I don't have anything tremendously new to report. So glad to be here. I'll only be able to be here for a little while. I'm coming to you from Evanston, Illinois right now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I will see if I can mute out. Okay.
Can I just say?
Yeah, go ahead, sweetie.
Yeah. Just before we get on to the main topic today, Miles, I just wanted to say that in yesterday's paper, there was a whole thing about UFO sightings on Whidbey Island. And we bumped into a friend of mine at the grocery store last week. And he said that he lives right along a small landing strip for little prop planes that we have on the island. And he said he was woken up in the middle of the night, went out onto his deck and looked out across the airport, and there were two UFOs flying, hovering right in front of him. So I just wanted to mention that little aside.
And if I could just say, by the way, Paul Hellyer has several YouTube videos where he talks about that in depth. So if you're interested in it, they are out there. Some old ones and some recent ones.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're back to the topic of agenda. And Miles, you wanted to say something agenda-wise?
I just would say, yeah, I endorse the agenda as is. What I will talk about is, some of the things that connect, that I introduced, that I'm working on, how they connect to the Climate Healers Social Club at the End of the World Radish Go Vegan concept. Thank you.
Awesome. Good stuff. And Adam posted a comment, a question from one of our viewers. Oswald Spengler asked what your take on Dar Jamail's not buying Guy McPherson's hospice message and won't interview McPherson anymore. McPherson says that Dar Jamail has joined the defamation crowd. So let's just address that real quick. My thought on that is, you know, I have tremendous respect for Guy McPherson and his message. And I also have respect when Fred mutes his microphone. But anyway, you know, Dar Jamail, you know, everyone gets to believe what they want to believe. And if Dar Jamail doesn't want to take seriously the planetary implosion, that's his business. That's really all I have to say about that. Any other comments on? Go ahead, Fred.
I missed all of that. So who is the person you're just talking about?
Okay, we got a comment or a question written from one of our viewers, Oswald Spengler, asking what our take on Dar Jamail's not buying Guy McPherson's hospice message, and that he won't interview McPherson anymore. And McPherson says that Dar Jamail has joined the defamation crowd. So he's just asking what our take on that is.
I don't know who Dar Jamail is.
Okay, he's a prominent climate journalist, writer, interviews lots of people. And anyway, that's Dar Jamail. And Fred, you might want to mute your microphone. And Dan, you're on mute. And Miles, jump in whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Pardon me. Okay, so yes, with respect to any allegations, defamation, gossip, I certainly encourage a person who feels they've been wronged or abused or injured to, you know, my heart goes out to anybody like that, and for them to find the strength, find the help to take any allegations to the authorities, to police. Having said that, you know, the world is full of a wide variety of people, and I'll share a concept of Carl Jung that Skip Conover taught me, and it is that we be careful not to fall for the devil's trick. And that means that we don't allow relationships to be totally destroyed with people, and you know, it's even like people disagree with. If we get into topics, you know, such as unexplained aerial phenomena, you know, some people have very committed beliefs in that. Other people think it's just, you know, people who are losing their mind kind of thing. But anyway, the idea is not to lose relationship. So Dr. McPherson, I find, is very respectable track record of science and ecology, and he has an important message. I may not agree with everything he says, and I shift and change my perspective, but to me, he brings years of experience and knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And my perspective. Oh, go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
Let me just make a comment on that quickly. I read Dar Jamail's recent column in Truth Out. Now, I read it I didn't really focus on it. I just kind of, you know, glanced over it, perused it kind of quickly. I didn't see anything that made me think he was rejecting Guy McPherson. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of conversation about, you know, Guy McPherson's message that essentially he doesn't see any way out. There's nothing that could be done. And by the way, everybody, it's exponential. And what I encounter a lot is that's the part of his message which people don't want to hear. I mean, the social club at the end of the world started as a result of McPherson's message and our belief, or our, when you're talking Guy McPherson, you don't like to say hope, but the hope that something could be done, and if not, to just simply go down fighting. And Guy McPherson's response to that is, great, go down fighting. Not a bad thing to do. And again, but what I find is that most people are open to solutions. And, I did notice there was a Guy McPherson, trying to think who it was with, there's so many of them, where he was being, he was being interviewed by the guy who does Black Bear News. And they were talking for about an hour, and I listened to most of it. And Guy, the guy whose name, his first name is Kevin, and Kevin was saying, I hear people say it's dire, it's an emergency, it's a crisis, etc., and we need to do something now. But then Kevin goes and he says, but I don't know what is going to actually be done that's feasible. And then they discuss some geoengineering stuff. But the thing, I think it's very disturbing to people that it's exponential. That's something, again, people don't want to hear. And as you look at what's happening in the United States right now, where we keep getting endless rain in the grain growing belt. And that means that it's possible this year that there's going to be very little of corn, soybean crops, and wheat is being affected also. And I saw that in, they were showing some pictures of Nebraska, where a lot of the, I think 2/3 of the fields in, I think it's eastern Nebraska, are now covered with, kind of sand silt. And it's so, it could be the case that at the end of this summer, 2019, we find that we're going to have a real shortage of grains available. And if that does happen this year, and then people start to understand there's probably only about a year's worth of backup grain available in the United States, then, the thoughts are going to go, well, what if something happens again next year? Or, so I think that, the situation remains dire. And in addition to figuring out what we might be able to do to refreeze the Arctic and, draw down the greenhouse gases out of the air. And this has been mentioned too, is the fact that, how do we cooperate? Guys, for the last 2 weeks, I've been talking about the problems with, fundamentalist religious tribal stuff and nationalistic tribal stuff. In order to have any hope at all, you've got to have cooperation among the United States, China, Russia, and other players who have the technological capabilities to maybe do something. So that, I just wanted to throw that in right there, and I'm going to go ahead and mute out.
Very good. Thanks, Dan. Next up is Miles. Take it away, Miles.
Yeah, just to echo what Daniel was saying, we've had last year's crops in Alberta and generally, I suppose, in Canada were way down because of drought. So it's this weirding of weather that we're getting because the jet stream is no longer a stable spinning east to west. It's getting really loopy, going way up and down. So, and in addition, the farmers, I think if I recall, I was trying to find the article someone sent me, but their income was 50%, half of what it normally is because of the yields. So it's all the more important that we do prioritize how these grains are used. And to, as Dr. Rao has talked about, it takes 5 pounds of plant food to create 1 pound of meat food. So we really need to get onto the vegan diet as these crops become less available because of the climate changing.
Yeah, my understanding is actually far worse than that. 20 calories of grain to produce 1 calorie of beef is the statistic that's stuck in my mind, and it's not quite so bad a ratio for pork, and poultry does the best with a 7-to-1 ratio, but it's still a 7-to-1 ratio. So let's, take the 7 calories or the 20 calories of grain instead of the 1 calorie of meat. Next up is my sister, Victoria. Take it away, Victoria.
Thank you, Jamin. Just wanted to quickly comment, just because I have such great respect for what Guy McPherson has given up to get a message out. And I agree with you. Do your research. Decide for yourself. It's out there. But I don't understand, and I see it more and more, I'm never going to interview so-and-so, or I don't agree with them, so I don't like them. And it's like, my goodness, we're all in this same predicament. So I just wanted to say, I think it's more shoot the messenger. I think Guy is coming forth with absolute facts to the best of his ability and looking at projections. So I'm with you, Jamin. Believe whatever you want to believe. I appreciate Guy's directness very much. The other thing on the planting that you were speaking about, I think, Dan, it is happening right here in Oklahoma. A lot of them have not planted. They had planted. Now, a lot of that is gone or will rot. So we are talking major shortfalls in Oklahoma, and we're right in that grain belt. So absolutely. But, and I can tell you that's no hoax. So just wanted to throw that in.
All right, Adam's up next, followed by Melissa. Take it away, Adam.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm not on board with the hospice idea either. I mean, and I think I've said this before, but it just removes if there's any possibility at all, then I think we should be trying for that possibility. If we follow the hospice plan, that's like throwing in the towel without even trying. And humanity hasn't had a chance to really try yet. And, and that's why I think the platform is so important, because it will give humanity, at least the way I see it, it'll give humanity a way to try. So that's what I want to say.
Good stuff, Adam. Take it away, Melissa.
Yeah, I think this vegan idea is really beautiful. I think it's something people can get their minds around and can actually action. The other thing I wanted to mention, in parallel to the grain crops failing and all the flooding, is the oceans are in a crisis. And I just read an article the other day about the Puget Sound that is actually dying. And so the sooner we can get on board with the veganism and stop the commercial fishing, get rid of the single use, so that the sea mammals and the fish aren't having to swim in amongst our plastic and feed it to their babies and have them die, including the birds, the better. So I just wanted to bring the oceans back into the conversation as well.
Beautiful. Thanks, sweetie. Victoria is up next, followed by Miles.
Melissa, it's so ironic you just said that, because one of the things that I had looked up last evening was just the water and the oceans, and speaking to a friend of mine who just did an ocean crossing and all the trash that he encountered. But just in case anyone's forgotten, and I think it's always a sobering number, 96.5 of all the Earth's water is in the oceans. 3.5 is all the fresh water that we have, and most of that is frozen and locked in, at least some of it. And that's only 3.5, or 69% of that is ice. So if you look at that, only 3.5% of it is fresh water, and we look at how the oceans are, I think it's just sobering statistics. And I thought it might be good to just go over those again.
Thanks, Victoria. Take it away, Miles.
Very important statistics or numbers that Victoria presents about how little fresh water we have. And I would also agree that a big focus for our social club at the end of the world, Climate Healers, not only the vegan diet, but also cleaning the water. And that's both our on-land fresh water, but also the Puget Sound and the oceans, the big dead zones like in the Gulf of Mexico. And in Canada here, I just the other day, not too long ago, learned that our very large Lake Winnipeg in Manitoba, which is a very large surface area lake, not very deep, mind you, but it's basically dead. Apparently, they're telling people it's not even healthy to go swimming in it. Now, there is a presentation by an American biologist, biochemist named Dr. Huber, Huber. You can find a recent presentation by him talking about glyphosate. This glyphosate Roundup by Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, is wreaking havoc on all of us. You have glyphosate in your body right now. And yes, you can go and get your Roundup at your grocery store or your hardware store. You can go out and spray some on your dandelions, but you are also killing your natural biome in your gut. And there's a huge spike in GI, gastrointestinal tract infections or issues like colitis and gluten problems, gluten intolerance, and other digestive disorders. It's also affecting the sperm count in males. It's increasing autism. They believe there's a direct correlation. And in fact, in this presentation, he actually cites Alberta Children's Hospital data, which is a plug here for our own health system. Their studies showing that is almost like 100% got to be causation due to this use of glyphosate. I would suggest that's why Lake Winnipeg is dead. I would suggest that's why your Puget Sound, our Puget Sound, because it's part of British Columbia too, is also affected. All this runoff is killing the ecosystem and even ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Next up in the queue is Jamin. Take it away, Jamin. Don't mind if I do. All right. You know, the big picture here that I am seeing, you know, just as a metaphor, the Titanic is sinking. And then if you peer into, if you're like in a sailboat, you know, a half mile away, and you peer in with your telescope into the Titanic, you see that there's all these problems on board the Titanic: health problems, social problems, psychological problems, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just this cluster mess of nested Russian dolls of problems. And, you know, the very fact that so little of humanity was acknowledging that there is this gigantic problem of the Titanic sinking, the Earth imploding, as Dan says, was what inspired us to create and name the social club at the end of the world. It's like, all right, humanity, if you're not waking up to the fact that the ship is sinking, and Fred, if you want to mute your mic, that'd be awesome. Thanks. You know, let's start a social club at the end of the world. Like, you know, let's freaking celebrate it, almost like a party, right? And, you know, as shock value to wake people up. And so anyway, here we are at the social club at the end of this world. But now 2 years after we started, you've got a lot more people waking up. And, you know, for me, the burning question that now faces us all now that we are waking up is, what do we do about it? And with that, I'll pivot to the topic of the main agenda for today. And to see the text here, click on the screen that has white at the bottom. See all the little boxes at the lower right of your screen? Click on the one that's white and that has text on it. That's the one I'll be sharing from here, if you want to see it. And I'm just going to start reading, and then please cue yourself up when you want to comment. But it'll take me probably 3 or 4 minutes to read through this, and I'll scroll through as I go. Introduction. We have a big thesis of what it will take for us to save life on Earth. Prior to unveiling our thesis, I will bullet point our assumptions, and based on these assumptions, I will set the table for our thesis. With the table set, I will create an imaginary division of humanity into leaders and followers for executing on the needed transformation of humanity, and finally, I will unveil our thesis. Okay, assumptions. Number 1, we, all of humanity, and indeed all of Mother Earth, are in an extremely urgent predicament. Per Guy McPherson, for example, and his excellent synthesis of it all, we're in an extremely urgent predicament on a timescale of months to begin to make a very hard hairpin turn. If we fail to initiate the turn, we are in for an extremely hard crash. That's my best estimate, is we've got months at best to initiate a hairpin turn. This turn will require the active, committed participation of a bare minimum 90% of humanity. We can support perhaps a maximum of 10% of temporary holdouts, though ultimately everyone must get on board. That's another assumption I'm making. And finally, third assumption, to achieve the preceding, we need a model that will transform humanity en masse, where they are convinced of A, the urgency and necessity, and B, that this plan or strategy or program, whichever one we come up with, and I'll get specific about that in a moment, that this plan will carry the day, and that there is something in it for them to get in early as opposed to wait and see. We all need to get on board with the hard hairpin turn that's coming, if we're going to have any hope at all. So, next, setting the table. The urgently needed hairpin turn of which I write above consists of a radical transformation in the fundamental modality in which 99.8% of humanity, aside from the last remaining indigenous populations living in harmony with nature, is operating. So for all of us on the social club and pretty much everyone watching, we all need to undergo a radical transformation in how we're living, our modality of living. This transformation must go from a modality of separation and hoarding, which is what we're all living right now, where the cost to Mother Earth is a secondary concern, to a modality of profound solidarity and unity, where a new united humanity works together in very tight coordination, using a very advanced application of radical collective intelligence as a category of collective intelligence to organize ourselves and heal Mother Earth. To make such a transformation in and of itself is widely considered impossible, given how far down the path we have gone in terms of overpopulation and carving up Mother Earth in such a way that virtually all of her is owned by one person or another. To make such a transformation in the time frame needed is then easy to write off as doubly impossible. So, how will we take on this doubly impossible task ahead of us? A critical factor which will both help and hurt us is the fact that Mother Earth's life-supporting systems are rapidly failing. And that's what brings someone like Guy McPherson to say that we're in hospice. Increasingly, the big headlines in the national and international news are about abrupt climate change and the sixth mass extinction. In addition to the reporting on the incontrovertible facts of planetary collapse, the progress made in terms of waking up humanity and the media by individuals and groups such as Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion are notable. So in the midst of this great awakening, there is a burning question which beckons to be answered. What do we do in the face of all this? All right, we're all starting to wake up en masse. Great, what do we do? And this question has barely begun to be answered by humanity as a whole. The loudest answers to date have been those put forth by Extinction Rebellion, which basically amount to governments of the world, it's up to you to rapidly decarbonize the global economy and transform the mode of governance to a more holocratic model. That's what it boils down to. And of course, tell the truth as part of that. Our biggest challenge to Extinction Rebellion's demands is that governments, by their very nature, are extremely poorly suited to either of these two big tasks, decarbonization and transformation of the very model of governance that put them in power and keeps them in power. Okay, so if not the governments of the world, then to whom do we turn? And this next section is called Leaders and Followers and seeks to answer that question. Well, in a word, we turn to leaders, those who, like us, get the urgency, get the magnitude of the transformation required, it is total, and who believe it is possible, and who commit to finding and implementing such a transformation in a worldwide coordinated cooperative effort. The vast majority of humanity has been conditioned to be followers. Just look at our school systems, our education systems, the media, etc. It is what it is, but the bottom line is that the onus is on the leaders then, people like us, to give the followers something to follow that they can believe in and commit to. And the leaders in turn, and any of us can be leaders, it's just a matter of choice. The leaders in turn must find a way to reach a consensus very, very quickly on what the plan is. And by the way, when I say leaders, I'm not talking about government, if you missed that point. So we've got to reach consensus on what the plan is. Our thesis in turn consists of a synthesis of the best thinking of a number of us as to what the core plan should be, which can unite our leaders to in turn develop and make ready the plan for the followers to follow. And with that, I'll give a brief overview of our thesis. So as regards giving the followers something to follow, the first thing we must agree upon, I propose, is that the easiest, most virally spreadable, and most believable thing to follow is, drumroll, a story. Secondly, we need to provide a place, a physical place, to experience this story that everyone's talking about. And finally, one visit to this place must transform the visitor radically. One visit. And then they go off and talk about it and proselytize and evangelize about it. So here's a first crack at the story, and then we can start going from there. And I know Miles is in the queue. Thank you, Miles. I'll cue you in a second. The story. There is this community of people who are adamant that the entire world must go vegan ASAP as part of a broader global transformation to a compassionate world. 100% vegan, no more single-use anything, a world without hunger, a compassionate economy, and a compassionate set of living arrangements for humanity, which in turn facilitate humanity collaborating to heal Mother Earth. And this is all part of the story now. They are building these community centers wherein they have a vegan community cafe where everyone eats regardless of ability to pay. And next door to that is a vegan grocery and vegan cafe and bakery where there is zero single-use anything in the cafe, the grocery, and the bakery, etc. And they are building a planetary collective intelligence optimized for co-creating the design of this new compassionate world, of which these community centers are just the starting point, and for managing its implementation, along with all of the necessary parallel transformations, such as the transformation of human culture itself. And then I kind of go on from there. This is very rough draft, what follows, but I would put out there that, let's develop this whole concept of the community center, the community cafe, etc. But cast all of that as but one proposed vector of global transformation. And we propose to facilitate all of humanity, proposing as many different strategies and vectors of transformation as they want. There's going to be multiple vectors. This is just one. Let's apply our collective intelligence to co-create all of the needed strategies, solutions, and components, etc. And to do this, we need two things. We need a technology platform wherein people can collaborate online and in person, and we're using such a platform right here, right now, in Google Hangouts. Thank you, Google. We also need a planetary community using the platform. And thank you, members and participants and viewers of the Social Club at the End of the World. The community centers constitute part of the platform. The web-based platform that we're in the process of building constitutes the rest. The goal is simple: to transform all of life on Earth radically so that we save as much of life on Mother Earth as possible. The set of solutions to get us there is not necessarily simple. Let's tool up our collective intelligence and have at it. And everything proposed and referenced herein is proposed to be a major part of it. So that's what I've drafted so far. Miles is in the queue. Feel free to queue yourself up if you want to comment. Take it away, Miles.
Okay, so great first draft, and I love how you acknowledged the indigenous people of the world who are still, a few of them, living in harmony with Mother Earth. And what I'll be doing is I'm writing this up, but it's our synthesis. And when I say our, I mean the collective unconscious, and how through my individuation, my perspective, this is what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and starting to transform it myself. So I'm not suggesting anyone has to embrace what I'm putting forward, but again, I call it our synthesis because I'm just where I've pulled it together. But it's all the shared ideas that I've heard over the last basically 4 years. And I'll be putting it into a Canadian context related to this. One of the questions or statements that you often hear up here is we have to decolonize our minds, and we're still colonized. Well, I would suggest there's a better word for people who are not in Canada under the Indian Act. I would say the word colonization doesn't really apply to me. But what does apply to me, and maybe you would agree, is we're under now the influence of essentially corruption. I would suggest that's a better word. And who are we corrupted by? Well, the system. And we're not colonized because neither Canada nor the United States are anymore underneath the old empire, British Empire. But we're still under this industrial growth society paradigm of perpetual growth. And that is essentially led by what your president, Dwight Eisenhower, warned us about on his farewell speech, or in his farewell speech in 1961. He warned of the military-industrial complex. Now, he suggested, actually, he wanted to put in military-industrial congressional complex, but he was persuaded to drop the congressional. But indeed, what you're saying is the governments are not working for people. There's a Princeton University study and they're an Ivy League conservative university down there. And they said, yeah, if you analyze all the decisions that have been made, very rarely are they reflecting what the majority of Americans really want to see. So we have to pinpoint that we have to transform away from the oligarchy that's led by the military-industrial complex, which now the complex includes education, police, surveillance, security, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, the list goes on. And it's now proven that fewer and fewer people are in the cabal of the money mafia that former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and Minister of Defense writes about in numerous books. Thank you.
Good stuff, Miles. Up next is Adam, followed by Dan. Take it away, Adam.
Okay. Well, I wanted to respond to what Miles was saying about how they're under corruption. And he said he asked, well, who's doing the corrupting? And so I want to bring up my money message again and say that it's really not people that are doing the corrupting. What's behind it all is money. And it's just the way money works, and it causes us to just seek out any source we can to gain money. And so the head of a corporation is not a living person. It's money, because the corporation, well, the bottom line is the stockholders, and all the stockholders care about is whether the stock goes up or down. And so that controls the corporation pretty much, except for maybe if a stockholder owns 51%, then the rest of that stockholder will have the majority vote. But again, he votes so that, or he or she votes so that they can make money. So that's all I want to say right now. Thanks.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Adam. Take it away, Dan.
Yeah, so here's a few thoughts to consider. So right now in the United States, we're heading probably towards, a purge, and it may be limited. What I'm referring to is that, the new Attorney General under Trump, William Barr, he's going after the group of Justice Department, FBI, CIA, etc., people who tried to prevent Trump from getting elected. And then once he was elected, they've spent a lot of time and money trying to get him out of office. And at this point in time, for example, yesterday, it was shown that the Mueller team, who have been the special counsel team investigating Trump, Russia collusion, that they actually were altering the transcripts of people. The whole thing is going to go very, very badly in this country. And, William Barr may limit the extent of the purge because it could become massive potentially. But the reason I'm bringing that up is it's something which is pretty much off of the mainstream media, the corporate media radar. with the exception of a couple of shows on Fox News. And so this is coming. This is going to really hurt the Democratic Party in the United States. And what they're going to be left with, I think, when you get try to pick up the pieces from this, they're going to go after Donald Trump on climate change. This is going to be really the big battle, I think, politically. At this point in time, we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about the fact that the oil companies knew this was coming back in the 60s, and that's not forgivable, really. I mean, who could forgive it given what you got now? And that in the 1980s, the United Nations, James Hansen, etc., told us, the jig is about up, and we ignored it. And she's saying that's not something we can just forgive and forget. So, and she's saying that within the context of, hey, I got this Green New Deal, you need to give it serious attention. And the context of even the new Green Deal doesn't even approach the problem with exponential climate change, but it's going to be out there. So I think as the summer of 2019 in the Northern Hemisphere continues to unfold, and the purge that's going to take place here in the United States, and it's probably going to be kind of explosive. I think that climate change consciousness is going to get raised pretty quickly, and we all know it's happening right now just because enough people, I think, in the middle class and the upper middle class, classes around the world who have access to any kind of information kind of know this is really a problem. Our children may not make it. As a matter of fact, if you go to, Guy McPherson level stuff, none of us may make it. So I think that's where we're at. And I guess I'll just conclude by saying it's important to, as Guy McPherson says, to connect the dots. If the oil companies knew back in the 1960s that this was coming at some point in the foreseeable future, not immediate. We know what happened in the 1980s, and I brought up here last week or maybe the week before that the military, the United States military, which is a very sober, realistic point of view, as problematic as their point of view can be, but they've been paying attention and making plans about dealing with abrupt climate change. The Central American immigrants who are trying to get up here are coming from a ground zero of climate change. They can't grow their food adequately any longer. And yet we still don't even refer to them as climate change refugees. And there's just going to be more and more of that kind of thing happening. So to connect the dots, you say, well, what is the military planning to do if things start to go bad very quickly? And my guess is that what I was reading in this book was that they're going to, go to Fortress America. We're just going to have to maybe close off that border. We can't possibly supply the resources, especially if we're having grain shortages for all these people in southern Mexico, Central America, northern South America, who can no longer survive. And again, and the final thing is, last week when I was talking about that Christian fundamentalist minister who was giving, the dichotomy between hard men and soft men, and talking about, shooting the guy's dog as an example of what needed to be done. And I think you can take that as something which is very latent in the consciousness of many, many people in the United States, and obviously it would be elsewhere. And that means that, you know, once the resources start to really dry up, especially here in the United States, where we have little experience with anything like that, you know, it's the hard men who do not have a problem killing and putting people down out of necessity, etc., with whatever ideology they may use. It's a regression. This is a, you know, the kind of thing that happens. You see it historically over and over again. And I think connecting the dots means that this particular narrative, you know, and so what if? What is the military going to do? What is the position of, I don't know, the Christian fundamentalists, the Jewish fundamentalists, the, you know, on and on. What has everybody got to say? How are you going to deal with it? Obviously, when you know the proverbial shit hits the fan again, you know, people will be reactive. But you know, we can talk about all of this right now, and we should, I think, and I think that is a very important part of any narrative. And clearly, going vegan is great, and that's just a logical thing, especially when you're going to be hit with grain shortages very quickly, or you already have shortages of food. That's why the Central American people are trying to get up here, and what happened in Syria, etc. Look what's happening in northern India right now. They got temperatures over 50 degrees centigrade, and it's affecting, I think, 200 million plus people. I mean, it's a thing. So I just wanted to bring some of that into the discussion, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, up next is Miles, followed by Melissa, followed by Jamin. And when Jamin comes up, I'll answer your question that you posed. Take it away, Miles.
Well, you know, what I'd like to talk to is the concept of leaders and followers. But before I do, a little bit more about the military-industrial complex President Dwight Eisenhower warned about in 1961. Quote, here's this is a report unquestionably will fan emotions, raise fears, and bring demand for action. This was the president of the American Petroleum Institute told an oil industry conference as he described research into climate change caused by fossil fuels. This quote, the substance of the report is that there is still time to save the world's peoples from the catastrophic consequences of pollution, but time is running out. This was the API, American Petroleum Institute president, Frank Eichard. The year was 1965, over half a century ago. It would be, he went on to say that one of the most important predictions of the report, this is back in 1965, is that the carbon dioxide is being added to the Earth's atmosphere by the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas at such a rate that by the year 2000, the heat balance will be so modified as possibly to cause marked changes in climate beyond local or even national efforts, unquote. He said, this report unquestionably will fan emotions, raise fears, and bring demands for action. The substance of the report is that there's still time to save the peoples from catastrophic consequences, but time is running out. So he was, and this is according to a letter by Stanford historian Benjamin Franta, recently published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Nature. It was the year that President Johnson's Science Advisory Committee published a report titled, quote, Restoring the Quality of Our Environment. So Frank Eichard was referring to President Johnson's Science Advisory Committee report, quote, restoring the quality of our environment. So yeah, this is absolutely shocking when you stop to think about it. Now, with respect to leaders and followers, I think one of the things for us to consider, I'm certainly changing, and that is to actually let the women take the lead. And that's because when you think about it, it is Mother Earth. I'll just summarize. I'm presently taking a course on Indigenous studies. I'm the only male in the class with about 18 women. And last class, I said, I do have to apologize because there's a set of statues in downtown Calgary, and I've broadcasted from there on the Social Club, and you may remember those statues. They're the famous five, and they are holding this sign that declares the Persons Act of 1929, October 1929. That was the day that in Canada women became officially persons and could then now be senators. So anyway, I just pointed that out, that, essentially, men have been running the show with an excess amount of influence for too long. And I think it's time for us to actually be followers. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Up next is Melissa, followed by Jamie.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment inspired by what Dan was saying. And Dan, I don't know if I heard you wrong or anyway. And this also ties in, Miles, with what you're saying about this feminine approach. Because there is the divine masculine and there's also the divine feminine, and they're both connected, and it's to do with nurturing, loving, restoring, keeping in balance. And it's coming from wisdom, and it's coming from a spiritual approach to living life on earth. And we are in a time of spiritual transformation, I believe, on the planet. So when we talk about shortages, what I love about what Jamin read to us and this project that's moving forward is that it's coming from this place of love. That it's not because we have shortages that we need to close our borders, that we need to say no to a certain group of people and yes to another group of people. Really, what we need to be doing is sharing the grains. So we have less grains on our plates in order to share with more people. And I'm just reminded of this experience I had years ago at Pratt Art School here in Seattle. And it's in a neighborhood that's fairly low income. And I had my sandwich, and at lunch break, I went out into the park, which edges right onto the school. And I sat down and I noticed all these children in the park. And this one little girl, she was obviously no parental guidance, way too little to be out there on her own, probably. She looked hungry. She was kind of tattered clothing. And she sat next to me. And I couldn't eat my sandwich in front of her. And I turned to her and I asked her, "Are you hungry?" And she said, "Yes." And so I shared my sandwich with her. And that made my sandwich even more filling for me because I was able to share it. And so I think we have to be very careful about talking about closing borders. I think we need to open borders, not just physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. And we really need to come together as a family to find solutions. And that's what I really love about this collective approach that Jamin keeps bringing us into. Let's solve these together. We also have to remember that there's lots of political influence and things that our governments are doing that are creating actually these situations in countries like in Latin and South America that are not healthy and that are actually putting people into wartime situations as well as famines. It's not just abrupt climate change that's unbalancing the world. So I really wanted to mention that. I feel really passionately about that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, sweetie. Wow. A lot to to talk about, a lot of really relevant topics coming up here. What I'd really like to do, first I want to respond to something Miles said about women leadership. I was actually meditating on that yesterday and thinking that, Sweetie, you and I could take a trip to the Dakotas and meet with our friends and relatives in the Lakota First Nation, where they have a very advanced model of women leadership, women elders and mothers coming together and making the major decisions for the entire community, right? So I'm all in favor of that. In fact, there are so many, practices and that we can reinstitute and adopt. And what I really think is most urgent is that we, the leaders, settle upon a pathway, a trajectory, a strategy, such as the one that I read about, or it could be a totally different one, but something. We need a strategy that will in turn bring in other people and develop other leaders. So like I talk about how this place that we're conceiving of and that we'll soon be designing and building the first of, Dan, you may want to mute your microphone there in the car, or if you can't, I can do it for you. But that this place that we're creating be transformational to the people who visit it. Just like, remember, we went to those vegan restaurants in Berkeley, California, and we just felt the transformation immediately. We were transformed in not just a restaurant that has vegan options, but everything vegan in the entire place, the ethos, everything. And we could just feel the nonviolence, the compassion, the love, and the unity of the people there. That's part of the inspiration for the Vegan Community Cafe. And then the larger community center, and this will get to Adam's question, which I'll read, is, Jamin, would you like to explain how you see RCI, Radical Collective Intelligence, working to solve a problem? Will it use think tanks? And if so, how would those think tank members be selected? So this is something we've talked about extensively, which is just the basics of Radical Collective Intelligence. But as a transition from the topic of the community centers, I'll say that the community centers will be designed to be these cathedrals of Radical Collective Intelligence, for lack of a better word. We'll have multiple meeting rooms, meeting spaces, places where people can get on video conferences like the one we're on right now, and also spaces for the application of brain swarming, which I think I've shown, and I highly recommend to everyone to watch the 4-minute video on brain swarming. If you just type in brain swarming, one word, into Google, there's a Harvard Business Review article that has that 4-minute video on there with cartoons. It's very easy to watch and understand. And that's really, the heart of the first phase of Radical Collective Intelligence, which is ideation, coming up with ideas. So I see the RCI platform as being implemented both physically at these physical spaces, at these community centers, as well as online through a platform that we're currently building. And it will be, so to answer Adam's question, will it involve think tanks? Well, yes, it will. And there'll be more kind of ad hoc think tanks, people just coalescing around a topic. Anyone who wants to participate in that topic can participate. Of course, groups can self-select and say, we just want to meet the 4 of us. We don't want to open it up publicly to include other people in the conversation necessarily, but we do want to broadcast it and let it be transcribed and let the output of this conversation be part of the collective intelligence. So the big picture is that everyone can participate, leaders, followers, everyone, in the collective intelligence, so that we collectively co-create all the solutions that we need, not just those that pertain to the community center and vegan and community cafe and vegan grocery and all that, but solutions such as geoshading, solutions such as transformation of human culture, transformation of governance, transformation of the economy and our entire set of living arrangements, et cetera, many of which will be embodied and implemented at the community centers, right? But many of which will be implemented elsewhere. But the collective intelligence can co-create all these different solutions. But some of the beautiful takeaways of the power of the community centers and vegan and no single use and triple C and all that is that we give humanity a place to come to and a place to talk about. Even if they can't come to it physically, they can watch videos about it and participate in video conferences that are held there, and therefore connect to it virtually, essentially travel there virtually. And whether they travel there virtually or physically, that they are transformed in the process, that they feel the love and the magic and the power of veganism, of nonviolence, of compassion, of ending single-use everything, and in living and eating and sharing and co-creating in whole new ways, right? So we need these vectors of transformation. We need to transform, and everyone needs to transform. And we need an on-ramp onto a superhighway of transformation. Miles was quoting from the president of the American Petroleum Institute, saying that, yes, we can make changes to save our planet, but time is running out. That was 50 years ago, over 50 years ago, 54 years ago. I think Guy McPherson, if Guy McPherson were here in our virtual room, he might chime in and say, in 1965, it was certainly true that time was running out. Now in 2019, time has run out. A lot of water has gone under the bridge, unfortunately. There's been a lot of spilled milk. And so we're dealing with a lot less of a platform for making the transformation happen than we did in 1965. I wish we were gathered in 1965. I wasn't even born yet, but I think Dan might have been. But anyway, better late than never. It's time now. And, we humanity have been having, what's scary is we've been having these conversations since 1965. When was Silent Spring written? 1963, something like that. But we haven't gotten it together yet. So what I'm saying is, what will be the off-ramp from this death spiral that we're on onto this superhighway of transformation? We have proposed an on-ramp, which I read a brief summary of. Are we on board with that on-ramp to this superhighway of transformation, or is there a better one? Right? Should we forget the community cafe and community center concepts and veganism and try something else? Go ahead, sweetie. And then,
Sorry, Miles. I actually have to go in a few minutes. That's why I'm going to quickly jump the queue. But I think we have to not worry about, is there something better right now? This idea really feels right to a lot of us, and I think we need to implement it. So whether, we take cue from Adam's, Adam, that was a really great suggestion. I just love your idea. Or whether we start it in another way, I'd say we just have to do it. And I just wanted to mention that here's an example. The Tulalip tribes and Lummi tribes, who are salmon fishermen, have actually now changed their focus onto the orca whales who are starving to death, and they're actually bringing fish to the orcas. They're actually feeding them salmon to try and help save their lives. This is an action step. It may or may not work, but they're doing it. So I think we just have to jump in and do it and see where it goes, because otherwise we're going to keep proposing ideas and never actually doing something. So let's start planting seeds. Let's start feeding animals as well as humans. Let's do it. Let's just be in the action mode. I think it's a great idea. I think it can work. We don't know, how it'll eventually turn out, but I'm all for it. And I love you guys lots. I'm really sorry I've got to go, and I always enjoy joining all of you. So lots of love and blessings.
Thank you, sweetie.
See you later. Thank you, Jamin.
You're welcome, sweetie. All right. See you soon.
See you soon.
All right. Next up is Miles. Take it away, Miles.
Listen, could I just jump in for a second, Jamin?
Yeah, sure, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I'll have to go in just a few minutes myself. So kind of final thoughts and maybe a little clarification. Uh, right now, by the way, as far as the community cafe concept goes, I'm all for that. I think it's unequivocally a really good thing to do, regardless of whatever happens. But let me go back to uh, the issue of kind of history and reality. Um, so here in Chicago, here's a quick example. In Chicago, you've probably been getting the news that we continue to have a lot of gun violence in Chicago, despite the fact that, we have a new mayor, et cetera, et cetera. And so the new mayor, who I really respect, Lori Lightfoot, uh, she has commented that, we can't really solve the violence problem in Chicago, which is mostly confined to the south side and the west sides of the city. And it's mostly centers around gang activity and neighborhoods, many neighborhoods in the city, essentially dominated by street gangs. And so she made a comment to a reporter that we have a problem. It's economic. People in these communities don't have jobs, etc. And part of the problem is disinvestment in these communities. And unfortunately, that actually glosses over, ignores what's the real problem in Chicago in terms of the violence. Chicago has been deindustrialized since the 1970s. First jobs were sent away to, states that did not support union activity. More profits, more money for the corporate interests. Then the outsourcing of jobs out of the country started big time at some point in the 80s and has continued full throttle until today. That's actually how Trump got elected, was by pounding home the message to the so-called blue collar displaced workers in the Rust Belt that, you guys have been screwed, and it didn't really need to happen. And then they lied to you that everything would be okay. And so it's the deindustrialization in Chicago that gives rise to underground economies, mostly concerning the drug trade and other things. They don't have a court system to, settle disputes, so they use guns, and it becomes that kind of a problem. But Lori Lightfoot, by not underlining the deindustrialization and the fact that, we have to have some sort of community service, whether it comes through infrastructure projects or whatever, to have these young people, we have in the African American community in Chicago, 45% of the age group 20 to 24 are unemployed. Well, what do you think they're doing? I mean, to survive, they're not part of the homeless population, which, of course, a lot of people end up going that way. Why does she ignore that and talk about who wants to invest in dangerous neighborhoods where there's very little money available anyway? And so when you ignore that, but she is a politician, and here in blue state, Illinois and Chicago, to talk about the deindustrialization problem, that's caused Chicago to have this grief, would mean that then maybe you'd have to be starting to talk about, maybe not Trump himself, but at least the message that he used to get elected, which was the big one. Maybe there's something to that. And so, we end up censoring people self-censor, and we have a lot of censorship going on. And I think when it comes to climate, this is the last thing I'll say. Just for clarity, I'm all for, I'm actively supporting as best I can Tulsi Gabbard as the Democratic candidate, who I think would far and away be the best person. And I think she also, if she could ever get traction, would be probably the most capable of taking Trump down. But the thing is, yeah, women leadership, that's probably a good thing. You look around the world, it seems promising. But at the same time, the reality on the ground is you have men, and a lot of them, as this regression goes on, and in the United States, because so many people are heavily, armed up, it's going to be, we need to talk about not only the positive that, the community cafe concept is all about. That's definitely a wonderful altruistic kind of a thing. And it has some chance of really gaining traction and helping. However, we're going into a regression right now, and whatever you want to attribute to it. And we need to start talking about what do we do as the regression sets in, and what can you predict based just on history happens. So with that kind of discordant note, as I usually provide here to the club, I got to check out, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week. Take care, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Great to see you. Take care. All right. Next up is Miles, followed by Adam. Take it away, Miles.
Okay, thanks very much. And to talk to what Daniel was just saying, that we're in regression, this is what we need to reverse. So I'm screen sharing now, and this is thanks to the Advanced Reading Group of Skip Conover, who's the producer of the Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group. And at our last educational webinar, he talked about Carl Jung and Dr. Edinger's and Dr. Murray Stein's stages of consciousness. So instead of regressing, what we need to do is move everybody up as we can through their stages of consciousness. So the first stage we all enter as infants and children. It's called the participation mystique. We basically are the center of the universe. But then there's an awareness that, who are these people that are always around me? These parents. So parents become gods in a sense at stage 2 when we're toddlers, and such as dad is the best dad in the world. Then as we get older, we start thinking, maybe dad doesn't know as much as he seems to think he knows as he once did. And we start to look at religions and different ideologies or isms. And we start going to church or synagogue or mosque or whatever, the shopping mall, but we start finding belief elsewhere. But then often, such as in my case, and maybe yours as well, we realize there's something missing at church or synagogue or temple or whatever. And we're thinking these, people in leadership, they don't really know all that I think I now starting to know. And then you move into basically, God is, the religion isn't working for me. You may become nihilistic. You may become atheistic. You may fall into believing everything's based on science. That's the 4th stage. The 5th stage is people may actually go back to church or temple or synagogue and mosque, but they know that the pastor or the imam doesn't know it all because they actually have had some experiences themselves, some personal, unexplainable instances where they felt they got a message from God somehow. Then beyond that, there's this other stage called synchronicity. And that's where I'm now, since I've started to understand Carl Jung, I start going, wow, yeah, this really does connect. And what we're doing here is sharing, and we're going, oh, wow, that is interesting. I love Adam's idea. You know, money is a problem. Money is maybe this source of our issues. And, you know, I come in here and you're talking about artificial intelligence, and then I'm thinking indigenous wisdom, and my goodness, there's some sort of a synchronicity between all these things. And anyway, I would suggest that's what Melissa was talking about, the concept of love. When we are thinking the higher love, to quote, what's the name of the musician? I can't remember, say, give me a higher love. Anyhow, he's famous, but I can't remember. I'm getting to be a senior. But anyhow, the message is, yeah, we can get to this higher stage where we say, okay, Christians, you've got your beliefs over there, and there's a lot of great stuff there, but there's some strange things that have gone on. Same with the Muslim faith or the Jewish faith or Buddhism. We start to, I think, come to this word love as a causal connecting principle. Now, peak experience, Kundalini, I don't really know very much about that, but just wanted to say that we want to go to these higher stages as quickly as possible. And to that end, here's a plug for Climate Healers. They're having their next webinar, climatehealers.org, webinar 10 o'clock Saturday Mountain Time, that's Phoenix time, June 8th. And the topic is spiritual, make God great again. So with that, I will stop my screen share and thank you.
Great. Thank you, Miles. Next up is Adam. Take it away, Adam.
Okay. Well, I would like to respond to Skip Conover's stages of consciousness. What he doesn't really, he describes a world that we didn't evolve in. Anthropologists tell us that our Homo sapiens species originated about 315,000 years ago, and that our population levels stayed less than 10 million until our population started to rise about 7,000 years ago, and then it's just gone asymptotic. And well, during that, so for approximately 308,000 years, and just call it 300,000 years, we lived in a different type of culture. We lived as hunter-gatherers, and like young boys and women and young girls, but young boys, as for the example, they would get up and look forward to joining the hunt, becoming a man, and they developed their. We evolved learning that kind of life, and today we're basically forced into an unnatural world, and we don't look at that. I mean, we're as boys today, we didn't evolve having to go to school and sit in a desk for hours. We didn't evolve to live underneath all this pressure. We evolved being free. I mean, anthropology says that we didn't even have a concept for work as when we were hunter-gatherers, and we don't think about that. Like psychology, one thing I wanted to say to Dan is, when a person goes to counseling, it's usually because for some reason they don't fit into this world. They're not, and so they have problems. They're not able to work like other people. And so basically what's happening is they're not able to fit in this world. And psychiatry doesn't really look at that. They think there's something wrong with the person, and when that person is to work again and fit in this unnatural world, then they're declared as healed. When in reality, the people that are fitting are probably not. They're not really acting naturally. They just learn and know how to fit in this artificial world in a better. So it's not that we're, we weren't really made to fit in this world. An example is the youth of today. We tend to say, well, the youth they're just lazy today, and they're different than us. They're not as good as us. They're all they care about is skateboards and they don't work. They don't have the work ethic that we had. And so that the attitude is put out there that the youth is of today is just no good, and that's not. But we don't really think about that. I mean, since I was born, the population of the world has tripled, and that means the pieces of the pie have been cut a lot thinner, and there's less opportunities. So that really messes with a person's mind. I mean, if you you try to adjust your life so that you fit into the world, you keep getting knocked down, and so those opportunities come by, and you can't grab a hold of them because you can't afford it. I mean, when I was young, I was able to go to college on a GI Bill. Well, now if you go to college, you can look forward to many years of paying back a student loan. That's the future that our young people are getting depressed about, because the opportunities just don't come to them, and that just eats on people after a while. I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Good.
I'll just add, if
Yeah,
I
go
could quickly, I'm looking for it right now, but actually the work by Carl Jung, if you study it, get into it, Adam, you'll find that indeed Jungian analytical psychology is actually saying what you said, that people who think there's something wrong with the system are actually the normal ones. And so Jungian psychology is actually mental health for everybody. And in fact, Murray Stein, who I mentioned briefly, he wrote this book, Map of the Soul, an introduction, in 1999. And the young people are seizing on this because of the Korean pop band called BTS, a huge phenomena in music right now, and they're promoting mental health for everybody. And Carl Jung is about mental health for everybody. Dr. Stein's most recent book is this one, titled Map of the Soul Persona, Our Many Faces. And BTS are writing their songs and making their music videos based on this concept of what I was talking about, moving to higher levels of consciousness. And so it's actually exactly what you said, Adam. It's old psychology, or a lot of psychology is, as you said, saying there's something wrong with you and we're going to try to make you feel better about working in this twisted system. And this is where First Nations just blow my mind all the time with their wisdom. Like they've always gathered in the circle. Our Cartesian, so-called enlightened Eurocentric version put everybody into the rows and aisles of chairs and desks for education. And the indigenous people, as you said, always had a different approach. And they always have used encouragement to educate children and let children try things and then coach them to say, okay, nice try, but you're going to try doing it this way. As opposed to our method of education is you sit them in rows and you have some person, supposedly the authority at the front, and it's you sit there and be quiet and listen to me and recite and regurgitate what I teach you. And then I'm going to give you a mark. Maybe I'll give you an F if you don't, do what I want you to do, the exact way that I want you to do it. So thanks to Anita in the chat, she provided me that when I was trying to come up with the song, Higher Love, it's by Steve Winwood. And I really recommend people play that song and listen to the lyrics. Thank you.
Yeah, really good stuff, you guys. I really resonate with what you were saying, Adam, about, we were not made for this world. We were made for a much older world when things worked, when we lived in harmony with nature. We're in this artificial world now with all this artificial money and artificial property and ownership and all these really unnatural ways of being that we need to break out of. So it's like we're in a very real sense in captivity in this artificial world. Guy McPherson says that we were born into captivity. And I believe that. So we need to, as twisted as we are, for lack of a better word, having been born into captivity and raised in this captive artificial system, how do we, as twisted as we are in this twisted culture, use the culture that we have and the people that we have, including myself, twisted though I may be? How do we come together and break out, right? It's like doing a prison break where we're severely constrained by the fact that we're prisoners, right? I'm always inspired by the group of guys who broke out of Alcatraz in the 1960s, right? They were severely constrained, but they found a way out. We are severely constrained and twisted. Let's find a way out anyway. And that's, the basis of the breakout strategy that I articulated earlier. Anyway, I'm going to have to get going. I need to do some serious work on writing all this up and preparing it. Y'all can continue if you'd like to for a bit longer.
Actually, I have to get on my way to an appointment. So
okay.
It's been another great social club. And I think it's really, we're getting a great focus on where we're going with this. So thanks very much, everybody.
Beautiful.
Can I just make one quick point?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. And Miles, if you need to take off, that's fine. I'll be here with Adam. And for recording.
So how you asked the question, how do we break out? Well, there's so many things that stop us from breaking out that in reality we can't break out. I don't think. So the way to break out is, I think, is to paint a picture or develop a vision or a plan for how to break out. And that's what the platform, I think, is would be used for. and there's so many things against it that we have to do it in not in reality. We do it in digital reality. In the digital world, we make the plan, and then when there will come a time when we can, if we have the plan there ready, then it can be implemented. But so we right now our vision of the collapse is of horror. I mean, we all think of it as, we have our own feelings of of Armageddon and stuff. Well, we need to replace that vision with a vision of hope. That's why I'm against this hospice idea, and I'm against the idea of no hope, because we need to have a vision of hope, and we can build that vision. If we build the vision in digital reality, then that'll bring us hope, because instead of having a vision of horror, well, if we build a way out in digital reality, then we'll have a vision of hope. Because what's coming, I think, is something that humanity has never done before. When the collapse comes, or hopefully before it comes, people will start looking for a way out, and the environmental groups and stuff. The reason we haven't been successful in getting humanity to change is because we've been there's a lot of reasons, but they don't have we're not telling them how to change. We tell them that they have to change, and we tell them what they have to change to. They have to reduce their carbon footprint, but we don't tell them how to reduce their carbon footprint, because the reality is, so they don't change because the reality is that in order for them to reduce their carbon footprint, all of society has to change. And the only way we can't get all of society to change. I mean, realistically, a person or a family who's already cut as many corners as they can, can't really cut any more corners. They have to survive in this system. So, and they can't survive.
Can I interject, Adam?
Yeah.
I think the bottom line of what you're saying is we need whole system change.
Yeah.
Individuals don't really have a roadmap, because there is no roadmap. What we need is a whole system transformation roadmap.
Right.
Transforming everything holistically and in stages. And we need a plan for that.
Right.
And right now that plan does not exist. And our main thesis is, with collective intelligence, we can have the intelligence to build such a plan. Then we can envision a way out, right? The folks who escaped from Alcatraz had to first envision and talk about a way out and liberate themselves in their own minds before they could liberate themselves in physical reality. For us, it's much the same. We need collective intelligence in this platform of virtual reality to design the plan, the transformation, the whole system transformation, as well as the stages. And then we've got a roadmap that we can follow. And right. I'm suggesting that a primary vector, not the only one, can be the community centers, the vegan community cafes, et cetera, that start the transformation and also serve to recruit people, so that our collective mind can grow as more and more of us grow and participate in this designed whole system transformation?
Yeah, the way I look at it, like like we've got we're on a battlefield. There's a battlefield, and the environmental movements, especially like Extinction Rebellion, is on the field, and they're about ready to battle. They're battling the enemy, and they're an army, but they're using the same weapons and the same tactics that we've been using for half a century, and that haven't worked really. So by this platform will give us a way of putting another army on that field, and so we can, and this army would have different weapons and different tactics. And so that's the way I see it.
Very good. Couldn't agree more. All righty. Well, shall we wrap it for today?
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Good stuff. Great stuff, Adam. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone, for participating. And thanks, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you in 1 week on the next Social Club at the End of the World. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.